Welcome to the module on mental health in COVID-19. Let me begin by introducing myself. I am Dr. Girija Mahale, psychiatrist, currently working as the head of Symbiosis Center for Emotional Wellbeing at Symbiosis International Deemed University. Co-facilitating with me in this module is Ms. Yoshita Thadani, who is a psychological counselor at the Symbiosis Center for Emotional Wellbeing. This pandemic has affected several aspects of our life adversely. Hence, not surprisingly, mental health of many of us has got significantly affected. Through this module, we will be explaining the various psychological impacts and then how we can identify whether our mental health is affected, and lastly but most importantly, ways in which we can improve our mental well-being. So, let us begin with a poll question. You have 30 seconds to answer this one. So, before we begin talking about what have been the psychological impacts of COVID, let us first understand the few basic concepts. As we all know, in our culture and society, mental health or mental illness is something we do not openly talk about and hence is easily misunderstood. So, let us first understand what is mental health. Mental health is an integral part of health. It determines how we think, feel and act in a given situation. The way we deal with our everyday stress, the kind of interactions we have with other people and the choices we make also determines our mental health. The good thing is that just like our physical health, which we can improve through exercise and good food and nutrition, there are ways in which we can improve our mental health too. So, that is about mental health. Now, let us understand the second important concept of stress, as stress is something we encounter in our daily life every day, right? But again, something that is not very well understood. What is stress? Stress is nothing but pressure or tension. It is a demand that is placed on ourselves either externally or internally. Let me give an example to explain this. In the current pandemic, some of the external demands that have been placed on us or those that have been a change to what were there in previous times have been that of wearing a mask or maintaining social distance. So, wearing a mask while stepping out of home or going anywhere is something that requires a conscious effort and has been a change to previous times and hence is a small type of stress. Similarly, there have been various such changes that have happened in this pandemic time either because of COVID itself or indirectly because of the lockdown and the conditions that were imposed by this pandemic. And these have created various situational stressors. So, these are examples of external stress or external demands. Internal stress or internal demand is something that we place on our own self, an expectation of our own self that we have of our own self. For example, if I have this expectation of myself that I need to complete all my household chores and all my work before 5 p.m., then that is a demand that I am placing on myself. It is not because of anything external. So, both these types of internal and external demands create what we call as stress or tension. Now that we have understood what stress is, let us see how we deal with stress or what we call as a stress response. Whenever we are met with stress, we use our mental and physical resources to meet that demand or to meet that stress, and that is how we mitigate stress in day-to-day life. So, there is a demand, we either use our mind energy or our body energy to meet that demand. But if the stress is chronic or it is excessive in nature, which has been the case during this pandemic time, because we know that since the last 15 months we are enduring this pandemic and there is no sight of it still coming to an end. So, it is a perfect example of chronic stress. For some, it has been excessive stress, especially those who have actually experienced COVID themselves or who have lost their near and dear ones. Or for some who have had to change their jobs or leave the place and go back to their villages because of loss of job. For them, this stress has been really acute and excessive. Now, whenever we are met with this kind of an acute stress or stress which is excessive, then our body goes into this flight or fight mode. Let me just explain this concept a little bit. Now, in the olden days when mankind just came on earth, at that time where the challenges for human beings were very biological in nature, that is the threats that humans had were that of wild animals or of storms, earthquakes, etc. Therefore, to survive, this flight or fight response was created, which is the body sensed this threat and it sent a message to our brain which released certain chemicals in our body which prepared us to either fight that threat or run away from that threat to protect ourselves. So, it is a protective mechanism that we have within ourselves to protect ourselves from the threat. Or if both fighting the enemy or running away from that enemy was not possible, then human beings would freeze in that situation. But over a period of time, as human beings have evolved, the nature of the challenges that human beings now face have changed. The challenges that human beings now face are more psychosocial in nature, such as financial stress, relationship stress, academic stress, and so on. However, this evolutionary response has still remained. That is, when faced with any of this acute stress, we still go into this fight or flight mode initially, before the message then goes to our further evolved brain, which is the thinking brain, which then allows us to problem solve or take the right decision in order to solve that problem adequately. So, this in short explains how human beings in general deal with stress. Now, what happens is over a period of time, if stress continues to affect us, then the mental resources that human beings possess start to get depleted and we experience what we call as distress. Now, I mentioned to you something about mental energy, right? To understand this, first let us understand the concept of mind. What is mind? Let me give you a very simplistic example of the mind. Imagine your mind to be formed by your thoughts, your emotions and your behavior. Imagine a triangle, as you can see in the slide. You can see a triangle where the three portals of this triangle or the three vertices of this triangle are your thoughts, emotions and behavior, and they are connected in bidirectional ways. That is, the way you think affects the way you feel, in turn it influences your behavior. Similarly, the way you feel also influences your thoughts and behavior. And lastly, the way you behave also affects your thoughts and emotions. So, when we experience stress, there is a pull in your thoughts and your emotions, and this triangle is getting stretched. The sides of the triangle are getting stretched. Let me give you an example to explain this. So, suppose I decide that it's COVID times and I need to be really physically fit. So, my self talk is, oh, I need to get up early in the morning at 5:30 and go and exercise. That is my thought. But my emotion is, in the morning when it is 5:30, it is very cold outside and I feel very lazy. That is when my thoughts and emotions are not aligned to each other and there is a pull. That is what we experience as stress or tension. Now, in order to mitigate that stress, what we do is either we align the thoughts with the emotion, that is we say, let today go, I will start exercising from tomorrow, or we push away our laziness and we bring in that passion that no, I have to start exercising because I want to get fit. So, we align our thoughts and emotions in order to bring that triangle back to equilibrium. That is how we use our mental resources to deal with stress. Now, if for some reason we are not able to bring back this triangle back to equilibrium, that is when it will create what we call as distress. Another very simple example to explain this is, imagine a rubber band. You have seen a rubber band, everybody knows what a rubber band is. What is a rubber band? It is a very elastic thing, right. So, imagine you stretch it. What it does when you leave it is, it will come back to its original shape. It has that elasticity or the flexibility to come back to its original shape, and it is stretchable. Similarly is our mind, it is adaptable and it is stretchable. But what happens if I pull it further? Imagine if I pull the rubber band further, then the tension in it will be so much increased that it will lose its shape, and beyond a certain point if I pull it, it will break. Same is the thing with our mind. If the stress continues or is excessive or is really high, then our mental resources will not be able to deal with it, and what we experience will be distress. If this distress continues for a prolonged period of time, then what we will experience is what is called as mental illness. So, stress, if not dealt with adequately, will lead to distress. If distress not dealt with appropriately, over a period of time can lead to mental illness. I hope this was simple to understand. Now that we have looked at all the basic concepts, now let us try and understand what, why and how have been the psychological impacts of COVID. Before doing that, let us see whose mental health has been at most risk during this pandemic times. First and foremost, people who have had COVID-19 themselves, who have suffered from COVID-19. Again, the psychological impacts will depend on the severity of the illness that they have had. So, people who have had moderate to severe COVID have had to be either hospitalized or kept in an ICU setting, and that has been an excessively stressful situation. Their mental health is more at risk. The second category of people is people who have had mental illness even before the onset of this pandemic. So, people who had history of depression, anxiety or any other severe mental illness, their mental health has been adversely affected with increase in their symptoms during this pandemic times. The third category is healthcare professionals, whether it is nurses, doctors, ward boys or anybody, ambulance drivers, police officers, all the frontline workers who have been relentlessly working for the last 15 months dealing with life and death, dealing with illness. They are going through a state of exhaustion, mental, physical exhaustion which they experience as what we call as burnout. The fourth category of community that has been affected is caregivers, caregivers of patients with COVID. It has not been easy. COVID has created a lot of social challenges, dealing with stigma, the fear that the illness itself has created, and for some even losses that they have had to encounter during this second wave have taken a toll on their mental health. And the fifth category that we have seen have been significantly affected are the vulnerable section in the community. When I say vulnerable, they are vulnerable either because of their age, that is any extremes of age. The elderly who have been experiencing a lot of social isolation, the children who have lost the opportunity to go to school and have been confined to their homes instead of being playing on the playgrounds, people from minority groups, migrants who have suffered job losses, daily wage earners who have lost opportunity to earn and have not had the basic needs met. These people, especially their mental health is at stake. Now, let us go one by one and understand what have been the mental health impacts and why have we seen these mental health impacts in these people, so that we can understand how we can work on our mental well-being. So, patients with COVID-19. As I said, the impacts that would be seen in this category would depend on the severity of the illness that they had. So, while mild to moderate COVID cases usually had to undergo home quarantine, the most severe ones were the ones who had to be hospitalized. So, imagine the emotional turmoil that a person has to go through when they are diagnosed with COVID. First and foremost, fear about the illness itself. Questions such as, what if I don't survive? What if I have to get hospitalized? Fear about infecting the family members or near and dear ones around you. The guilt associated with it, that is, oh my God, I have been responsible for infecting my family members. Plus, there are so many other emotions that this person may undergo when they are diagnosed with COVID-19. Shock, disbelief, anger about the whole situation. As the situational stress was also quite high because of lack of oxygen facility, lack of hospital infrastructure, lack of hospital beds, worry about whether I would get the right medication on time or not, was created in unsurmountable stress. What about people who had to be hospitalized? They were kept in isolation. Social isolation is one of the very important determinants of mental health. People who experience loneliness, it becomes an important vulnerability factor for developing depression or any anxiety disorder. Especially ICU admissions saw an increase in mental health problems, as when you are in the ICU, you are really cut off from the outside world. You feel quite disoriented, you feel confused. Moreover, you have no control over your own self, as you have so many lines, or you are possibly on a ventilator which does not even allow you to communicate with anyone. In addition, you are seeing very sick people around you, and that keeps your morale very down. All this can have significant and has had detrimental effects on your mental health. That's the circumstantial or situational stress which can predispose COVID-19 patients to mental health problems. In addition, your mental makeup or your personality in itself can influence your mental health. Your temperament can be sometimes very difficult. For example, for some people are very perfectionist in the way they function, and that makes you quite inflexible. Or some people are temperamentally very anxious, that is, they worry about small things generally. And as during COVID times, the worry had multiplied by 100 times, these people were the ones who were specifically vulnerable to develop mental health problems. So, situational stress, personality factors. Third factor which contributed to mental health problems in COVID-19 patients was medications or treatments that were used to treat COVID itself. You must have all heard about the use of steroids in the treatment of corona. Yes, steroids play a very important role in reducing inflammation in the body. However, if steroids are used for a chronic period or in excessive doses, it can cause significant side effects on your mental health. We have seen that in the recent times, because of steroid use, there have been increase in the cases of mood disorders or depression, and in some even very severe effects such as psychosis, where there is break in touch with reality and people experience symptoms such as seeing things which are not there or hearing things which are not being said. So, such have been the effects of COVID-19 on mental health. Also, even after recovering from COVID-19, your mental health remains to be at risk. People who have recovered from COVID, it has been seen that in the period after that, even after 6 months of recovering from COVID, they are coming in with neurological, that is brain symptoms, as well as with psychiatric symptoms or psychological symptoms. What are some of the neurological symptoms that are manifesting? It has been seen in some people that they are developing blood clots, which result in poor blood supply to the brain, and they are presenting with stroke or what we commonly call as a paralytic attack. For some people, they are coming with a lot of cognitive symptoms such as difficulty in attention, concentration, memory problems, even presenting with a dementia-like picture. For some people, they are presenting with what we call as a dysexecutive syndrome. What I mean by that is they have difficulty with all the executive functions such as problem solving or making decisions, organizing things, being able to control impulses, which are the functions of your brain which we call as the prefrontal cortex. Why and how this is getting affected is still being studied and researched, and there are no clear answers. People are also presenting with anxiety disorders, more particularly post-traumatic stress disorder, and with depression as well. So, why I am highlighting this is that even after you have recovered from COVID, it is very important to look after your health, your physical as well as your mental health, and to be watchful of your own health. And if you notice any of these symptoms or problems, then to get immediate medical help. Now that we have spoken of what are how the psychological health can get impacted in COVID, we will see what are some of the psychiatric conditions that can happen in people with COVID, or generally we have seen that in pandemic times these are the mental illnesses that have increased.
Now that we have understood what mental health is, what stress is, and what our stress response looks like, let's take a few minutes to understand how this particular stressor, that is COVID-19, is affecting the many areas of our life, whether we are a caregiver of a COVID-19 patient or not. If you can, there is a poll that is visible on your screen. I would request you to take a couple of minutes to write down what you feel is the answer to this question. Thank you. As we know, mental health is made up of our functioning in many areas of our lives. It takes into consideration our physical health, our mental health, and our social well-being. Therefore, this major chronic pervasive pandemic has caused disruptions in all areas of our lives. And because of that disruption, we may feel distressed because of many things. Some of you may have written that fights at home because of having to live in the same space with the same family members all the time is causing frustration. Some of you may have written that you have lost a job, or you may have lost out on a promotion, or you may have lost out on the opportunity to go to college and enjoy college life in its true form. Some of you may have even written that the fear of contracting COVID-19 itself has caused you extreme worry or panic, or the fact that your loved one is battling COVID-19 is a constant form of distress. Sometimes this distress becomes such an unconscious part of our lives because it is so continuous that we feel there is no way to change this. We accept this, and therefore there is no action that is taken to change this aspect. But we know that prolonged distress is very dangerous to both our physical and mental health, right? So as Dr. Girija spoke about that rubber band example, if you are to keep pulling on the rubber band, it is going to snap and it is going to break, and it will result into a mental illness. This is why we will spend some time to build our understanding of how the pandemic has caused us stress in 3 areas, as you can see on the slide. That is in our social lives, in our personal lives, and our emotional lives. As mentioned, in our social lives, we have noted that there is a large increase in conflict, right? Be it with your family members, your friends, your partner, your colleagues. These conflicts can be around the kind of protection that one takes while stepping out of the house. So personally, this is something that happens in my household, where I'm extremely worried if my family members don't take adequate precaution by double masking or by carrying a sanitizer and using it very frequently. So this is one of the stressors that I've seen very pervasively around my household, as well as a lot of people that I know. The whole process of stepping outside the house from that safety bubble that you've created, right, where you know in your household you can take care of the cleanliness, you can take care of the physical distance between you and your family members. But when you step out of your house, you cannot control what other people are doing, right? So stepping outside of your safety bubble can cause a lot of panic and stress. And since everybody is running low on frustration tolerance, there is undoubtedly increased amount of conflict that is happening. COVID-19 has also brought with it so much stigma, right? If you have had a loved one who has been quarantined at home due to COVID-19, you may have noticed that people in your immediate surroundings, like your neighbor, your house help, your watchman, they will tend to act a little differently around you. And this is due to the fear that they will contract the virus. And that tends to affect us, right? Because we as human beings are social creatures. And to be stigmatized because of something like a physical illness has a great impact on our mental health. When it comes to our personal lives, many areas have been thrown off track. Students have lost out on their college years. Adjusting to online education itself has brought so many challenges with it. Many jobs have been lost, promotions have been lost. People are also taking up jobs that may not be relevant to their field simply to earn a basic salary. And that is because they have a family to support. All of these changes have brought on a lot of anxiety, a lot of anger, a lot of helplessness. And the uncertainty of when this situation will improve just worsens all of these feelings. In continuation, finances have been majorly impacted due to loss of business, loss of jobs. Research shows that for one to be happy, for one to flourish, for one to reach their best potential, one needs to have a minimum income that will fund basic needs such as food and shelter. It is therefore obvious that if people cannot fund their basic needs, that there will be increased stress and therefore poorer mental and physical health. People also have generally lost out on opportunities to participate in recreational activities, such as spending time with families, with their friends, physically because of social distancing. It has also become very difficult to participate in outdoor activities such as sports, going to the gym, other religious and spiritual activities as well. All of these recreational activities which help people unwind, stay connected with each other and relax have been halted to a large extent. And if not halted, their formats have been changed, causing an additional stress of adapting to something new in these uncertain times. Now, all of these changes, all of these disruptions, all of these endings have caused a general pandemic-related fatigue in many of us. We have been experiencing a roller coaster of emotions from fear, helplessness, anxiety, amotivation, and most of all, the uncertainty of when it will all end. All of these feelings put together have transformed into what we call burnout and languishing. You know that feeling of not being able to find the motivation to do the simplest of things daily, such as having a shower, eating your meals, working. The feeling of not being able to be happy or positive, of lacking purpose, of feeling stuck and helpless is what we call languishing. And it is currently what the pandemic has made most of us feel. Having said that, there are other vulnerable sections of society such as migrant workers, daily wage earners, elderly and children who have been affected in a much more adverse manner. Even people with other physical illnesses or other mental illnesses, they have taken a hit in terms of COVID in a very drastic manner, and it is important for us, being a community, to recognize that yes, we have been impacted, but the vulnerable sections of society have probably been more impacted than we have. Okay, so now that we are aware of the different things that may be stressing us out, let's look at what some of the signs are that we can identify, which will alert us that our mental health may be taking a hit or may be on the decline. As you can see, the slide highlights the different type of signs: physical signs, cognitive or emotional signs, and other symptoms that you can recognize if there's something that is happening in your life that is causing you duress. Some of the physical signs that you may witness are a lack of energy, an increase or decrease in your appetite, sleeping too much or too little, experiencing heartburn or acidity more frequently than you usually do, feeling exhausted and fatigued even when you are not doing too much, eating more junk food or eating unhealthy food, or an increase in unhealthy eating habits, experiencing more aches and pains in your muscles and joints, falling ill more often, rapid pulse, and different kind of digestive issues. So over here I'd like to explain why falling ill more often is something that we need to particularly look out for during COVID, because we know that our physical health and our mental health is very much in sync. They affect one another. And right now, if we are stressing to the extent that our immune responses have fallen, that can backfire in terms of being in a pandemic right now. So if you recognize that your physical health is getting spoilt more and more often, or you're contracting illnesses more and more often, it would be good to take a step back and see whether it is the stress in your life that is causing it, or are there other physical symptoms that you need to look out for, or whether you need to visit a doctor for the same. Now, some of these physical signs can also be caused due to other things, right? Like if you have a digestive problem because of food poisoning, or you might be experiencing a lack of energy because of a troubled night's sleep. How can we distinguish that these physical signs are because of troubled mental health? Is by 1, ruling out any physical causes for these signs, 2, noting the frequency of these signs, and 3, whether or not they are interfering with your daily functioning. So these are a few steps that you can take to rule out whether any of the physical signs that you're experiencing might be because of a physical illness or might be because of your mental well-being. Some of the more mental signs that you may experience are that you might find yourself getting more easily agitated, where small things that usually would not irritate you have started to irritate you, causing many mood swings. You may feel lonely, you may feel overwhelmed. Some of your cognitive functions, such as decision making, making evaluations, judgments, focusing and paying attention, can also get affected. You can also develop a more pessimistic outlook towards life because of all these feelings. Some of the other behavioral signs that you may notice are procrastination or postponing the most basic activities, a decline in punctuality, an increased absenteeism from college or work, withdrawing from your social support systems, increased reckless behavior such as rash driving or increased substance abuse, You may also notice an increase in some nervous behavior such as nail biting or pacing around. Now, some more intense and harmful signs that one should not miss are when you notice that you or somebody in your environment may have started indulging in self-harm behaviors such as cutting your wrists, cutting your thighs, any body part, or getting really agitated and punching things and causing themselves pain and hurt, or picking at your skin, picking at your hair, digging your nails into your skin, burning your skin, or touching extremely hot objects to feel physical pain. So any of these behaviors which are consciously performed to hurt oneself is something to look out for. Now, you might be wondering why I'm talking about that or how this makes sense in terms of mental well-being. So here's the theory behind it. The centers of our brain that are usually in charge of pain, or the pain centers in our brain, they are the same for our mental health as well as for our physical health. So what happens when somebody is experiencing a great overwhelming emotion and they experience emotional pain along with that emotion, and sometimes that pain becomes very hard to deal with. So to distract themselves, they indulge in one of these behaviors that cause physical harm to themselves. And in this way, they are essentially fooling their brain because the pain centers are the same. And in doing so, they provide themselves with short-term relief. But we know that if behaviors like this continue, they can cause serious damage to people. So that is the theory behind why people self-harm. And it is important to note that in that moment, this is what they look at in terms of reducing their stress levels, and because they probably don't have any other outlet or any other way to manage that stress. So if you do notice this happening in yourself or anybody around you, it is absolutely important to get immediate mental health help for that individual. Another important sign to look out for is that you might have started experiencing thoughts of suicide, or you might start thinking about different ways to end your life because of the mental pain that you are experiencing. So this can start as simple thoughts, but they can escalate into making plans about suicide or trying to tie up loose ends. And these are signs that this person is in need of immediate mental health support. So if you notice either of these really harmful signs in yourself or anybody around you, kindly contact a mental health professional immediately. I'm going to be speaking a little about the different types of mental health professionals. So maybe when you are at this juncture where you need to reach out to a professional, please do refer to that slide as it will help you make the right decision.
Now that Yoshita has described the signs of distress, let's determine for ourselves where we are on that stressometer. Just like we use a thermometer to measure our body temperature, we are going to use this scale which measures from 0 to 10 to measure our stress levels. Now suppose you are on 0 on that stressometer, which means you are not experiencing any stress at all. One would imagine, wow, no stress means great. But unfortunately, that's not the case. No stress is also not good, as some amount of stress is actually required for us to take some action. An example of this is, imagine if I did not feel stressed with this pandemic at all, right? Then would I care to follow any of the protocols or precautions that everyone or the medical professionals are asking us to take? Would I care to wear a mask? Would I care to take the vaccine? Because I would not feel any stress, right? So some amount of stress is actually useful and healthy, as it helps us to take the necessary action and motivates us to reach our goals. How would I know if I am in that experiencing that healthy level of stress? If on that stressometer my stress levels are between 1 and 3. Again, how would I know that? If more or less I feel good, if my sleep is good, I am sleeping well, I am eating well, I am able to perform all my day-to-day activities well, I am productive, I am functioning really well, my interpersonal relationships are good, then I am experiencing healthy level of stress or eustress. If on that stressometer now I start experiencing stress on a scale of 4 to 6, that is when I would be now start to get alert, and this is where I am now experiencing distress. How would I know that I am in a state of distress? Now I notice that there are a couple of days in a week when my sleep is not that great, I am having difficulty in sleeping, or my appetite has not been that good. Either I am overeating or I am not feeling like eating at all. I start to notice some changes in my mood. I feel low for no reason, I feel very anxious, but all of this is still not interfering with my day-to-day life or with my interpersonal relationships. So, I am experiencing these signs of distress, but they are not causing any changes in the way I am functioning in my day-to-day life. Then that is where I am experiencing distress, and I am on that scale. I would rate myself on a scale between 4 and 6. Anything beyond 6, that is from 7 to 10, is a state of high alert, where I am probably experiencing signs of mental illness. Okay. How would I know that? If majority of the times on most days of the week I am having difficulties with my sleep. Either I am not able to sleep or I am sleeping excessive to what I used to sleep before. If again my appetite is also showing similar changes, where I am experiencing weight gain or weight loss because of these appetite changes. I am experiencing extremes of mood, where I am feeling low pervasively, or I am feeling anxious for no reason and nothing, I am not able to relax at all. So, changes in mood which are pervasive, and all these sleep, appetite, mood changes now start interfering in my day-to-day life, where I am not able to study, where I am not able to do my daily chores, where it has started impacting my productivity. That is when I would know that I am possibly going through some form of mental illness. So, 0, 1 to 3, 4 to 6 and 6 to 10 is how you would evaluate for yourself what sort of stress are you experiencing. Now, what is to be done at each level? If you are experiencing healthy level of stress, then that is perfect, nothing needs to be done. But if you are in that stage where you are experiencing distress, then that is when you need to take charge of your mental health, where you can do some of the things that Yoshita will be talking about later in this module, such as relaxation techniques or some self-care strategies that you may use to bring your stress levels down from 4 to 6 to 1 to 3. But if you are on that scale between 7 and 10, then that is the time where you need to contact a mental health professional. This is the time when you should not wait to reach out to a mental health professional for help. Okay, let us move on now. Now that we have understood how to recognize mental illness, let us try and understand the different types of mental illness which we have especially seen increased during the pandemic times. So, let us see what are the common types of mental illnesses associated with COVID-19. The most common mental illness or mental disorder which we have seen are the anxiety disorders. So, what are anxiety disorders? Anxiety disorders are classified by symptoms of excessive worry which is over and above the real or actual threat and which causes physical symptoms such as palpitations, difficulty in breathing, and which leads to interference in day-to-day behavior, such as avoidance type of behavior. The second type of, one of the types of anxiety disorders is panic disorder or panic attacks. Now, what are panic attacks? Panic attacks are extreme surges of anxiety, where the person has excessive worry and the symptoms peak within 5 to 10 minutes, where they experience increase in heart rate, difficulty in breathing, feeling of dizziness, along with feeling of impending doom, as if they are going to die or they are going to have a heart attack, and where no help is going to be available. This is a classic panic attack. When people experience repeated such panic attacks, we classify it as a panic disorder. Again, why we have seen an increase in this disorder is because people have had near death-like experiences during COVID, where especially people who have had severe COVID infection have had to be on ventilator and have actually experienced what breathlessness feels like. And therefore, even after recovering, sometimes when they are reminded of their illness or they see something on the television, then they experience this extreme surge of anxiety where they experience these panic attacks. It is important to be able to differentiate between what a panic attack is from breathlessness of COVID, because they can sometimes present very similarly. The best way to do is check it out with your health professional, whether it is due to your oxygen saturation dropping or whether it is a sign of mental illness. The third category of mental illness that we see which has increased is what we call as post-traumatic stress disorder. Now, post-traumatic stress disorder is seen in people who have been exposed to a traumatic event. Now, what is a traumatic event? A traumatic event is where he or she was confronted with or witnessed actual or threatened death or serious injury, or any situation which was threatening to their physical integrity or of their near and dear ones. Okay? That defines a traumatic event. And usually the response to this traumatic event involves intense fear, helplessness or horror. What happens in such people is that they experience this traumatic experience in the form of flashbacks, recurring dreams, distressing recollections in the form of intrusive thoughts, images or perceptions, and they experience intense psychological distress whenever exposed to any cues that symbolize or resemble any aspect of that traumatic event. Now, it is a very complicated definition, right. So, let me give you an example to explain this. What would be a typically traumatic event in the COVID times is admission to an ICU setting. That is a traumatic event which is a near death experience, which then becomes, which the patient experiences recurring memories of that admission, and that results in persistent avoidance of the stimuli associated with the trauma, where the person avoids anything related to hospital, whether it is doctors, nurses or even the smell of an alcohol swab can be triggering for that individual. And the person also experiences other symptoms of hyperarousal, such as feeling tense all the time, having disturbed sleep, and feeling nervous or irritable most of the time. So, this is again a very commonly seen disorder during this COVID pandemic. The fourth illness that I am going to talk about is called obsessive compulsive disorder. As the name suggests, it has obsessions and compulsions. What are obsessions? Obsessions are when a person gets these repetitive thoughts, repetitive intrusive thoughts over which the person has no control. So, the person recognizes that these are their own thoughts, but also recognizes that these are very senseless thoughts, but cannot control it. And the only way to bring them under control is through engaging in certain acts to pacify those thoughts, which are called as compulsions. For example, especially we have seen an increase in this kind of obsession during this pandemic, is fear of germs or fear of contamination, wherein this individual has these repetitive thoughts that my hands are not clean or the surfaces are not clean enough. The person recognizes that they have washed their hands, but the thoughts are so repetitive in nature that in order to pacify them, they have to repeatedly wash their hands or they repeatedly have to clean the surfaces, and that can be very, very distressing and can interfere with your daily life to a great extent. So, that is when there are various other kinds of obsessions and compulsions, but due to paucity of time, I am going to limit myself to explaining this one type. The next type of mental illness is, we have heard this term many times, depression, but again very less understood illness. As we very commonly use this term, I am feeling depressed or people around me look depressed. So, is feeling depressed same as depression? Not really. Let us try and understand the difference. So, feeling low or feelings of sadness, almost all of us have experienced at some point during this pandemic, but that does not mean that we are suffering from depression. Depression is when you feel low most of the time without any reason over a prolonged period of time, where you are unable to enjoy things that you would previously enjoy, such as for example, if I enjoyed painting in the past, then even when I am painting now, I am not able to derive pleasure out of it. And where small things upset me to an extent where I start crying easily, where everything becomes an effort and I experience low levels of energy, where I experience disturbances with my sleep, where classically I have difficulty either falling asleep or I wake up before my usual time. In depression, most often we see changes in appetite as well, where you may feel that you have lost your appetite. In adolescence or in younger age group, usually we see opposite, where we see excessive sleep, that is the child is sleeping through the day even at night, and increase in appetite or excessive eating. So, depression can present with decrease in appetite as well as increase in appetite, decrease in sleep as well as increase in sleep. But the thought process underlying in depression are negative thoughts about self, negative thoughts about the future, and negative thoughts about the surrounding. That is, I feel that there is no hope for the future, nobody can help me, and I am not worth living. These are signs of severe depression which need immediate help. Along with this, I might experience physical symptoms such as having recurrent headaches, having a lot of physical pain in my body, which also can be a symptom of depression. The last category of illness that I am going to talk about is called as complicated grief. But before that, let me explain what grief is. We have seen that in this second wave especially, a lot of us have experienced losses in our family or in our neighborhood. And what happens is, whenever there is this unexpected loss of a significant person in our life, we go through a period of grief, wherein we experience various emotions like anger, sadness, fear, worry, and even guilt. These usually come in pangs and go, wherein when you are experiencing these emotions, you yearn for this lost individual. But over a period of time, these feelings settle down and we come to terms with the loss. However, for some, especially those who have had unexpected losses or sudden loss, or in whom the individual was very young, the person is unable to come to terms and the family members continue to have excessive thoughts about the deceased one and may even experience intrusive images of the dead one. This is what we call as complicated grief, which again requires treatment from a mental health professional. So, these are some of the mental illnesses that we have seen increased during COVID times.
Now let's take a quick look at the different kind of mental health practitioners that are out there. Mental health practitioners differ based on their qualifications and therefore the kind of services that they offer. Psychiatrists complete their MBBS degree followed by a postgraduate specialization in psychiatry. They are the only mental health professionals that are allowed to prescribe medication. They are usually found in hospital setups, in private clinics, and in other mental health communities where they work. Clinical psychologists are the second type of practitioners, as you can see on the slide. They usually complete their MPhil degree in clinical psychology from an RCI accredited college. RCI is the Rehabilitation Council of India, and it is the organization in India that looks after licensing of clinical psychologists. The field of services comprise of assessments, that is psychometric assessments, of diagnosing mental disorders and treatment of the same via psychotherapy. The third type of MHP, as you can see on the slide, is a psychological counselor or simply a counselor. These mental health professionals are those that complete their MA or MSc degrees in counseling or clinical psychology. Their services usually include assessment and treatment of mental problems which are usually of a lower grade nature, such as academic stress, relationship stress, or other daily stressors that one might usually experience in their life. Now, psychotherapists are very similar to psychological counselors. However, psychotherapists usually specialize in the type of therapy that they provide to their clients. Now, as a service user, you are allowed, in fact, it is your right to ask the psychologist or the psychiatrist or the psychotherapist that you are currently visiting about their qualifications and about their field of services, because you have all the right to understand what kind of qualifications they have and what kind of services they provide. And finally, there are psychiatric social workers that complete their masters in social work with a specialization in psychiatry. Their work is usually more community oriented, wherein they work with families and communities to improve the mental well-being in their clients. So they are usually responsible for psychoeducating the families and communities of people with mental illnesses about the mental illness and what their role is in terms of helping this person in making progress or in getting rid of the symptoms that they might be experiencing due to mental illness. Now that we are aware of the important signs and symptoms, as well as the most common type of mental disorders that we are witnessing during the pandemic, let us take some time to understand what it is that we can do, things that are in our control to improve our own mental well-being. There is a saying that states that you cannot pour from an empty cup. This means that if you do not feel mentally well and stable, it will be impossible for you to look after your family members who may be COVID positive or generally are in need of support from you during these times. So let's take a while to understand what it is that you can do to improve your own mental well-being. Whenever a human being experiences something that throws them off balance or off equilibrium, the human being will do something to come back to a state of balance. In the same way, if our stress on the stressometer that Dr. Girija explained crosses a particular level, we will take action to reduce those unhealthy levels of stress. Now, these actions that we take are called coping mechanisms. The technical definition of coping is to invest one's own conscious effort to solve personal and interpersonal problems in order to try to master, minimize, or tolerate stress and conflict. These techniques can either be healthy for us or unhealthy. Some of the most common coping mechanisms of coping are stress eating, binging on TV shows or television, distracting ourselves from the problem, talking to a loved one, using substances such as smoking cigarettes or drinking alcohol to calm down. Now, how can we determine whether the coping activity that we use when we are stressed is healthy for us or not? So, you will be able to see the characteristics of healthy and unhealthy coping mechanisms on the slide in front of you. Healthy coping mechanisms are those which are sustainable, have long-term gains, and also those which we have to rely on internally and not externally. So, some of the coping mechanisms that I can think of that are healthy on the top of my mind are using art and craft to express your emotions, speaking to a loved one, meditating, exercising or playing sports in healthy amounts, gardening, and many more. Unhealthy coping mechanisms are those that are expensive, such as using substances like a cigarette, alcohol, marijuana. Those that may cause us short-term benefits but long-term consequences, such as avoiding a problem or distracting from the problem at hand by eating a nice comfort meal, sleeping a lot, watching a lot of television, using social media. These are distracting activities that may take our mind off the problem at hand, but it doesn't deal with the problem in the long term. And finally, the third characteristic is that unhealthy coping mechanisms usually have some form of external dependency. So, it is not something that you can do by yourself, such as picking up art and craft supplies, but it is something that has an external requirement, such as purchasing a substance and using it. Now, in times of COVID, we have particularly noticed that there is an increase in substance use, there is an increase in self-harm behaviors as spoken about in the previous slide. There is also an increase in consumption of news articles in a very, very unhealthy amount. And what this does to us, instead of comforting us, it causes more worry and more panic. So, all of these unhealthy coping mechanisms are ones to look out for. Do remember that coping mechanisms are temporary fixes to deal with stress, to bring us back to that equilibrium as Dr. Girija spoke about. It is always important to go back and address the origin of the stress for more long-term benefits. Now, let us look at something that has kept us going through the pandemic and that helps us battle stress in everyday life, and that is our resilience. Resilience is known as our emotional capacity to battle a crisis and return to a pre-crisis state. This means resilience helps us to cope with a crisis, assimilate it into our experience, allowing us to grow from it, and moving forward because of this growth. It is also an emotional capacity, and it depends not only on our internal qualities, but it also depends on external qualities such as our social support systems, the community that we live in, the socio-economic, political conditions, and also our geographical environment such as the climate. And because we don't always have control over these external factors, we are going to focus on the internal factors that can help us channelize our internal resistance during the pandemic. So as you can see, this slide showcases to you a model known as the Resilience Donut Model by Lynn Worsley. It shows us that resilience can be pictured as a donut. The outer circle are the external factors, whereas the hole in the middle are our internal factors. So let's look at these internal factors that we have control over. This part is going to be activity based, so I would request for you to keep a paper and a pen handy. I would like for you to take a minute to think about a stressful situation that you are currently experiencing. It could be anything. Maybe you are a caregiver of somebody who has COVID, or it could be something absolutely different like, an upcoming online examination. Think of any current situation causing you distress and write it down on the paper. Once you have done so, let us now look at the first phrase in the internal circle of the donut. That phrase is I have. What this phrase asks you to think about are the resources that you have available to use in this current situation. So let's take the example where you are a caregiver of a family member with COVID-19. A resource that you may have available to you during this stressful situation may be the help of your neighbors who are helping you with buying groceries or are helping you by cooking meals and sharing them with you. We often get so stuck thinking about what we don't have or all the obstacles that we completely forget about available resources. So now, I would like for you to pause, take a few minutes, write down what resources you have available to you that will help you battle your current stressful situation. Great. Now that you have identified some resources, let us look at the second phrase, I am. Now what this phrase asks you to think about are your qualities, your positive qualities that help you in tough situations. Again, let's take the example where you are a caretaker and you recognize that one of your qualities is that you are usually a very organized person. Being organized in this situation can be extremely helpful for you because you will know how to plan your day so as to take care of your household chores, about taking care of your family member, and most importantly also taking care of yourself. Again, I would like for you to pause the video and write down your qualities that you think will help you given the situation that you have penned down. I hope you could write down a few qualities. And now finally, let us look at the third phrase in the circle, I can. I can helps us figure out what is in our control in this particular situation. Again, I am a caretaker of somebody who has COVID-19 and I know it is in my control to keep checking with my family member about how they're feeling, right? So as you may have learnt in the previous modules, if you have a person at home who has COVID, you need to check their temperature often, you need to check their SpO2 levels. These are parameters that you check on a periodic basis. So being in the same household, you know it is in your control to go knock on your family member's door or drop them one text message saying, hey, check your vitals and update me about your vitals. So this is something that is in your control and you can actively do in this situation. The second thing that you can do is you can follow up with the doctor and you can also ensure that your family member takes their medication on time. So these are a few things that you can actively work on or you can actively take control of that will help you feel more confident about tackling the current situation. In this way, again, I would like for you to pause the video and write down a couple of things about the current situation that you feel are in your control and that will help you feel more prepared and confident about battling the same. Fabulous. Now that you have written down these 3 internal factors that contribute to your inner source of resilience, I do hope that you are feeling a little less stressed and a little more prepared to face the challenges that are on your way. Please do remember this model and do use them whenever you feel like you are in a crisis situation or where you feel you need to look inside of yourself to find your resources to battle the current situation. If we are to keep our resilience reserves full, if we are to keep filling our cup, one of the things that we need to actively invest in is our self-care. Self-care has been defined as providing adequate attention to one's own physical and psychological wellness. Self-care can be of many different types, as you can see on the slide. They can be physical, emotional, social, spiritual, personal, space-oriented, financial and work-related. I'm sure you may have heard of this term recently, as it has gained a lot of attention and importance during the current times. And because of this importance that it has gained, it is also widely misunderstood. So let's look at some of the myths of self-care. Now, one very blatant myth is that self-care is only for those who have poor mental health. And this is absolutely incorrect, because self-care benefits one and all. Some think that self-care is self-indulgent and selfish in nature. However, this is absolutely incorrect, and if you are required to refuel because stress is constantly coming your way, you will have to very proactively indulge in self-care. And I say this because life is filled with stress, right? Currently it is the pandemic, but once the pandemic goes away, there are innumerable things that do pose obstacles and challenges for everybody, which is why it is very important, no matter the situation, to fill your reserves of self-care. Self-care is often also looked at as something that is expensive, but this is not the case. If you look at the slide, you will see multiple forms of self-care that are not at all expensive, such as meditation or saying no in situations where you don't have the personal energy, or exercising, using art and craft. These are all forms of self-care that are not expensive and that you can do by yourself. Sometimes self-care is also viewed as things that only make you feel good. Unfortunately, this is not the case. Sometimes self-care involves taking difficult decisions, such as drawing boundaries and saying no to people when you may not have the mental energy to participate in things. As you can see, the slide highlights various techniques to practice self-care, and we would encourage you to take some time out either on a daily or weekly basis to invest in your own self-care. Just as we would not ignore a fever that persists for too long and get a doctor's consultation, it is very important as a form of self-care to also take your mental health symptoms very seriously and visit a mental health professional if they persist for very long and tend to cause you daily disruptions. Finally, let's speak a little about how we can continue to be hopeful and optimistic during times like these where everything seems pretty grim. Often, when we are extremely distressed or anxious, our thinking patterns will also reflect the same. And we often tend to get caught up in thinking traps, as we would like to call them. These thinking traps are patterns of thinking that are unhealthy and unfounded in reality. But because in that situation, our emotions are so heightened, we are not able to differentiate between a rational thought and an irrational thought. Now, some of these common thinking traps are: 1. Catastrophizing. What do I mean by catastrophizing? It basically means that you think of the worst possible outcome in that situation, even though there is no solid proof of the same. So, let me explain this with an example. Let's say you have just received a test result and you have failed in that test. And because at that moment your emotions are so heightened, you might think, because I have failed this test, I am going to fail the course, and because I failed the course, I am not going to get a job, and because I don't get a job, I am not going to be successful. So, you see how one situation, that is failing your test, has made you think about how you might not end up succeeding in life. So, over here you can see a grave conclusion is made about your future, even though there is no solid proof that you will actually fail your future. It is just that you have not passed this test, but because in that point of time you might be so anxious or you might be so overwhelmed that this affects your thinking, and we tend to jump the gun and think of the worst possible conclusion. The second type of thinking trap is labeling. What we do here is we either attach labels to ourselves or to other people, which affects our interaction with them. So, for example, let's take the same situation where you have failed a test and you attach the label of failure to yourself. Now, in the future, if you are approaching a task or an assignment or anything, and you have that internal perception that I am a failure, the way you approach that task will also be flawed, because you are already dooming yourself to fail. So, it is important to not use such labels loosely and to analyze when you are using such labels and whether they are affecting your interactions with others around you, or whether it is affecting the amount of energy or effort you put into activities because of these labels. The third type of thinking trap that there is called discounting the positives. So, what we tend to do here is we focus on the negative of the situation and we disregard any positive that might have occurred. So, let us take another example. Let us say that you are preparing for your online examinations and you are not too sure that you will do well in your exams, and because of that you are extremely anxious and it is affecting the way you prep. But in this situation, you are probably ignoring the fact that your friends are helping you with the notes that you might have missed. They are even available, like your teachers are, to help explain any concepts that you might have missed out on in class. And because your focus is so much on the negative, you are again dooming yourself to fail because you are unable to take into consideration the other positives that might be helping you in this situation. So, again, it is important to reanalyze the situation and see if there are any positives that you are not acknowledging that are actually helping you through this. And the last type of cognitive trap that I would like to talk about is that of maximizing or minimizing. What happens here? So, either we will tend to maximize or minimize the impact of a situation in a very unrealistic manner. So, the same example where we have failed a test, we have maximized the impact to presume that we are failing our future. And in this case, again, it affects the way we might attempt things in the future. So, it is important to recognize that you make a conclusion or you make a kind of understanding based on the facts at hand. Just because you have failed a test, it does not mean that you will fail your future. I am sure if you sit and you think about it, you will find many other areas where you are probably doing well, but you are not acknowledging because of this current thinking trap that you are stuck in. It is extremely important for us to recognize these thinking traps because they do not benefit us. They harm us, and because they become patterns of thinking, they harm us more than we know it. Once we have learned to recognize these thinking traps, we can stop, reframe these thoughts in more realistic and optimistic ways. A few ways apart from this to find hope in today's world is to kind of go out of your way and read more about COVID-19 recovery stories. I know currently the news is focusing more on the number of COVID patients. At a point, it was speaking about the shortage in supplies. And all of this information is very important, yes. But instead of only focusing on all the negative news, such as the number of deaths, the number of cases, it might also be helpful to take up a new hobby or to, kind of take your mind off COVID, and spending time in a hobby can help you increase your productivity as well. People who find solace in religion and spirituality, it is a rich time to connect with your faith. It helps to keep one going. Trying to think of your purpose is something that can also assist you in finding that motivation that you may have lost during the pandemic. And finally, recognizing that it is okay and normal to not be hyperproductive in such circumstances is very important. Do not put undue pressure on yourself if you cannot be as productive as you have always been. These are new times for everybody, and it is okay to take some time to figure things out at your own pace. Another technique to keep you going is celebrating the small wins on a daily basis. Keeping a gratitude journal is also something that can help reduce feelings of hopelessness. Pandemic or not, these are some techniques that you can use to generate hope and optimism when the going gets tough.
Hello everyone. I hope all of you are safe wherever you are. My name is Priyanka Bajaria and I am one of the psychological counselors at SKU, which is the Symbiosis Center for Emotional Wellbeing. We are a group of trained mental health professionals headed by our wonderful head, Dr. Girija Mahale. And today I'm going to speak about a topic which is going to help all of us move forward during this adversity that we are going through. So I would like to know from you and for you to reflect for 10 seconds, what is it that is helping you move forward in the times of COVID-19? Take a while to think about it. Is it PUBG? Is it books? Is it Netflix? Is it Hotstar? It could be anything and it could be different for everyone. We all are trying to literally find something from our account of strength and move forward during a time which is completely new, completely uncertain and very surreal for all of us. A common thread that binds all these little acts of strength that we are showing is the ability for us to be resilient. Resilience is such an important factor that is pushing all of us to just deal with whatever we are facing with. So what is resilience? You may ask. Resilience is the innate capacity that all of us have to bounce back from adversity. It is those little acts of strength that we all possess to move forward in whichever way we can. But just like any kind of health, whether physical or mental, resilience can be depleted. What I'm going to talk about today is how you can add resources to your resilience bank account so that it can help you move forward without being depleted often. So today we are going to review quickly 3 practices that is going to help us increase our resilience bank account. The first practice that I want to discuss is the attitude of gratitude. Gratitude is an extremely important protective factor that helps you build resilience. So, what I would like you to do is, before you go to sleep every night, think of 3 things, just 3 things that you're grateful for throughout the day. The second activity is, whenever you think of a negative thought, especially with related to COVID-19, you're going to choose very mindfully to bring back your attention to what you have gained instead of what you have lost. So mindfulness activity which will help you bring back your attention to a more growth mindset instead of a negative outlook. The third activity that we're going to discuss today is setting intentions. Now what you're going to do is, when you wake up in the morning, whatever time your morning starts, you're going to either write or declare certain intentions that you're going to follow throughout the day. So your intentions could be, today is going to be a productive day. Now whatever productivity means to you. For some people, productivity may mean I'm going to be able to wash utensils, which I don't like to do. So today either I'm going to have a productive day, I'm going to watch XYZ, I'm going to study X amount of work. So you're going to set a declaration for the day. I hope these practices help you in building resilience. We would love to hear how they're helping you. You can email us on skew_event@siu.edu.in and share your feedback about the videos and the activities.
Hello everybody and welcome. I am so happy to see that so many of you have joined in time. I will be starting in the next 1 minute. I'm just going to give a few additional people the opportunity to join in. Until then, if you can hear me clearly, I would request you to just put it in the chat. Maybe you can drop in a yes, I can hear you, or yes, we can hear you. We'll also use this time to adjust our sound. If you're using headphones, just ensure that you can hear me clearly. If you're using speakers, just adjust the volume so that you can hear me clearly. Thank you once again for joining in, and we'll be beginning very shortly. Thank you so much for putting in your comments in the chat. Okay, so I can see that we're around 70 people already, and because we're timely and we like to start on time, I'm going to begin the session. Welcome all of you to our first Mindfulness Circle. My name is Yoshika Thadani, and I am going to be your facilitator for this afternoon. My colleague and my very dear friend Priyanka Bajaria will be the moderator for today. So if in case you are experiencing any difficulties or you have any questions, you can write to her on the YouTube chat and she will make sure to convey them to me. We are from the Symbiosis Center for Emotional Wellbeing. So the reason why we thought of planning these mindfulness circles for the Symbiosis family is because we are aware of the challenges in today's times, especially given the added challenges of the pandemic as well as online education that we all are facing collectively today. So we thought, why not? Let's introduce our family to different types of mindfulness sessions so that we can practice them together, and you can also practice this in your free time and whenever you feel like you need to relax. So we really hope that this session will help you unwind, and it is the required break that you need to kickstart your weekend. A little about today's session. It is a 15 to 20 minute mindfulness session that basically involves a body scan. So the idea is that together we will scan parts of our body and we will try to release any pent up tension that we may be holding in any of these areas of our body. The simple requirement is for you to sit on a chair, okay? Ensure to remove your slippers or your sandals and keep your feet on the floor. However, if you're unsure about your surroundings and due to COVID, you're unsure about the safety, it's okay to keep your slippers on because safety is our first priority. I'd recommend that you keep your hands uncrossed, your legs uncrossed, and if you could place your hands gently on your thighs, that would be ideal. I hope that you are in a silent space where you will not be disturbed at least for the next 20 minutes. So, I think we're on board about how we should be before we start. And I promise you it's going to be a simple session. All you need to do is follow my instructions. So, on that note, let's begin. I want all of you to gently close your eyes. I encourage you to try and be as calm and comfortable as possible. During the activity, you may experience stray thoughts, feelings, and sensations that may distract you from my instructions. And that's completely okay. It's absolutely normal. But as soon as you notice that you are distracted, try and bring your focus back to my voice and my instructions. Try to keep your body still and avoid any extra movements. There are two parts to the activity that we will be doing today. The first part will include tensing or contracting a muscle body that I will ask you. And when we are tensing this muscle part, we will try to tense it for 5 seconds. After the 5 seconds of tensing your muscles, we will immediately and quickly relax them. And when we do so, we will spend at least 10 seconds focusing on this feeling of relaxation that is being produced in our body part. Try and keep all other muscles relaxed as we focus on one specific muscle group. For example, if we are focusing on the hands, let's try to keep all the other parts of our body as relaxed as possible. As we scan our bodies from head to toe, try to observe changes like the tightness in certain muscle parts and the development of light and soothing sensations when we release those muscles. Now, try and shake off your muscles and try to make your body as loose, light, and free as you can. We're going to be starting the activity by focusing on the extremities of our body. So let's start with our left hand. I want you to take your hand, your left fist, and clench your fist as tightly as possible. Squeeze the thumb. And release. Release your fist. Relax your fist muscles. And feel this relaxation
in your hand. Moving upwards. Now I request that you lift your left hand and bend it at the elbow so that your fist is pointing upwards to the ceiling. Now squeeze your bicep, which is the upper part of your arm. Try to tense it for 5 seconds. And release. Gently place your hand back on your thigh. Feel the relaxation and the tension escaping from your biceps. Now, I want you to straighten your left arm. Try to keep the front half of your arm on the chair and focus on tightening or squeezing your tricep. The tricep is the outer part of your arm. Squeeze it as tightly as possible. And release. Bring your hands back to your thighs. Feel the tension escape your left hand. Now that we've completed the left hand, let's shift our focus to our right hand. Back to the fist. Let's try and clench our right fist as tightly as possible. Squeeze your thumb. Squeeze it as hard as you can. And release. As soon as you release, you might feel a little bit of warmth sensation in your hands. That is the tension that is slipping away. Now, let's lift our right hand up, just like we did for the left, and bend it at the elbow, so that our fist is pointing upwards. Now squeeze your bicep, that is the upper part of your arm. Squeeze it hard. You might even feel yourself shivering because of the squeezing of the muscles. And release. I urge you to take some deep breaths during this break that we've taken. Great. Thank you so much for the feedback. Let's continue. Now that we've completed our right bicep, we have tensed it and we have relaxed it. Let's move on to our tricep. So straighten your right arm and keep your forearm on the chair. That is the front part of your arm. Now I want you to squeeze your tricep. That is the outer portion of your arm. Tense it and feel your muscles shiver for these 5 seconds. And release. Feel the tension slowly and steadily escaping your arms and your body. Now that we've completed our arms, let's move up to our face. We will start with our forehead. Try to make your eyebrows touch your hairline. Lift it up and feel the tension in your forehead area. A lot of us carry a lot of tension in this area. You might feel your head is heavy whenever you're stressed or you're feeling a little anxious. And release. Feel the tension escaping your forehead as you release the muscles around your forehead. Moving to your eyes. Let's close our eyes and squeeze the muscles around them really tightly. And release. Moving downwards, let's focus on the mouth. Let's try to squeeze and tense our jaws by biting our teeth. So try and bite your teeth really hard together. Feel the tension in your jaw muscles on both the sides of your jaw. And release. I now want you to press your tongue hard and flat against the roof of your mouth. Ensure that your lips are closed and notice the tension that is created in the back of your throat. Press your tongue hard against the roof of your mouth. And release. Moving down, let's focus on our neck and shoulder region. Push your head back as far as it will go against the chair. Feel your neck elongate when you push your head back. And release. Now, bring your head down and press your chin into your chest as hard as you can for 5 seconds. And release. Moving down, let's bring our focus to our shoulders. So take your shoulders and push them up to your ears as hard as you can. Feel the tension in your shoulders and your upper back. And release. Let's now focus on our chest region. Take a deep breath in, completely filling your lungs, and hold your breath for a few seconds. And now exhale slowly. Feel your chest fall whilst you are exhaling, slowly and steadily. Going lower, let's focus on our stomach. I want you to pull in your stomach and tense the muscles around your stomach for 5 seconds. And release. Relax and feel this sensation. Feel the tension leaving your stomach area. Bringing our focus to the back of our body. I want you to arch your back away from the chair and feel the tension running down from your shoulder to your lower back. And release. Moving lower to the lower part of our body. Let's bring our mind's eye to our thigh muscles and our buttocks. I want you to squeeze your thighs and your buttocks together as hard as possible. And release. Moving lower. Now for us to tense our calf muscles, I want you to take your toes and point them towards your head, producing that tension in the calf muscles. Pull your toes back towards your body. Contract those muscles in your feet. And release. Now, let's do the opposite. I want you to point your toes away from your body as hard as possible. You feel the tension all the way up from your hamstrings to your calves and your feet. And release your muscles. Now that we are done scanning each and every muscle of our body from top to bottom, left and right, I want you to very consciously try and relax your whole body completely. Quickly try and scan each and every muscle, and if you feel that there is even a little left tension in any of your muscles, contract it and release it, just like we have through this exercise. Any part of your body that you may be experiencing even a little tension in, try to very consciously let that tension go. Keep your eyes closed and let yourself remain in this relaxed position for a little while longer. Take a deep breath in, hold your breath, and exhale slowly. Breathe in, hold it, and exhale slowly. One more time. Breathe in, hold it, and exhale slowly. Now I want you to rub your hands and gently place them on your eyes, and then open your eyes slowly. Now that I hope that you've opened your eyes, I do hope that you're experiencing a little renewed energy, and most importantly, you're feeling relaxed and refreshed. I would urge all of you to stand up if possible and stretch your body slowly. I hope everybody is feeling light and free to some extent, and that this activity helped all of you in a little way, if not in a big way. This particular activity is extremely helpful in releasing tension from parts of the body that we don't even know that we're carrying. So it's very relaxing, and it helps to release any pent up stress or anxiety that you might be experiencing. This particular activity, though, is very helpful for anybody who might be suffering from any kind of anxiety, because solely one of the major symptoms of anxiety is tensioning of muscles. So even though you might not be mentally feeling that anxiety, your body will tell you that, hey, there's a little anxiety that's there, there's a little stress that's there, and this activity really helps in releasing that. Some people even find it beneficial to practice this just before bedtime, because it can be extremely sleep inducing. So, if a lot of you, or if a few of you did actually nod off or sleep off during the activity, that's completely okay. It is sleep inducing and relaxing, and that's why it is used also to induce sleep. So, in general, I would recommend any of you who experience stress on a daily basis, or just generally feel more stressed out, to try to do this activity on a daily basis. For those who have trouble sleeping, you can try and perform this activity just before going to bed. I hope it has helped you and it has been a breeze to follow through. If you have any questions, you can post them on the YouTube chat and Priyanka will relate to me and I will be more than happy to answer any doubts that you may be experiencing. We will be sending you a feedback form. Priyanka, I request you to please put the feedback form in the YouTube chat. And we will also be emailing those who registered the feedback form. So if in case you don't receive it on the YouTube chat and you're not able to fill it up here, please do check your email and provide us with your valuable feedback so that we can make the future sessions more helpful and to suit your needs. So any suggestions that you have, please feel free to put it back in the feedback forms. Thank you all of you for joining in, and I truly hope that this has been a good experience for you all. It was really, really great for me. And I apologize for the background sound in the beginning. I hope that didn't cause much of a disturbance for you all. If I'm unable to answer any questions right now, then you can always reach out to us in the feedback form. You can put in your email ID there and I will personally make sure to get back to you. Thank you so much for joining in, and we hope that you will tune in again next time.
Thank you all for listening, and we hope you have found this helpful. If you have any questions that you would like for us to answer, please feel free to drop us an email on scew.event@siu.edu.in. Take care and stay safe.